Now, Lebanon's economy is hurting. Growth has slowed to just over 2% a year from an average of 8% before the war in Syria. And now regional rivalries between Saudi Arabia and Iran have raised fears of a Qatar-style blockade. The resignation of Prime Minister Saad Hariri in Riyadh under mysterious circumstances has not been resolved. Just before he quit, the government had managed to pass a budget after years of political stalemate. Well, joining us now from Beirut is Sami Atallah, director of the Lebanese Center for Policy Studies. Good to have you with us. So, first off, how bad could all of this be for Lebanon's economy right now, particularly at a time when it looked like things were finally starting to pick up?
Well, indeed, this is actually might be very bad, in fact, just because Lebanon has been through many crises, some short and some long-term. But this crisis comes at the back of a protracted crisis that Lebanon has been facing since 2011 with the war in Syria. And now we're hosting 1.5 million Syrian refugees. And we have a major sort of economic problem in terms of jobs and infrastructural challenges. So this crisis, in fact, actually comes at a time where we're hoping and trying to get out of one that we're already in.
And how important is the fact that Saudi Arabia, that this is coming from Saudi Arabia, how important is that country to the Lebanese economy? Because, of course, you've got the thousands of Lebanese expat workers who work in Saudi Arabia sending money back. There's Saudi investment inside Lebanon. How important is all of that to the country?
Oh, this is very important and very significant. This is, in fact, the first time probably since or in the last 25 years that we actually face something like that, where an ally of Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, sort of may, in fact, impose either sanctions or affect the Lebanese expats who are actually working there. This is very significant on many levels in terms of the sending remittances to Lebanon's economy, which are deeply needed, which are important for the macroeconomic situation. They are also important for people's actually well-being here, people who actually receive these remittances. And in fact, there's a big, significant expat community in Saudi Arabia who work very hard and contribute to the Saudi economy. So if this actually escalates, this is going to be a lose-lose-lose situation. Lose for these people who are losing their jobs. It's going to be a loss for Lebanon because they're going to have to deal with more people, in fact, that are looking for jobs. And it's going to be actually also a loss for Saudi Arabia because they're actually going to be losing an important human capital, a lot of people who actually have nothing to do with the crisis in the first place.
Well, you talked there about the possibility of this escalating. How real is that possibility? Do you think that it could happen, that there could be Arab sanctions on Lebanon?
It's very hard to predict. We're not so sure to what extent this is going to escalate. You know, I think the events are unfolding on a daily basis. We're actually monitoring them to actually see if this is going to be, if there are going to be certain measures, economic measures that actually could or try to affect or influence the Lebanese government. But the big question is, if there are actually going to be any sanctions, this is going to affect Lebanon as a whole. It's going to affect the whole country. These sanctions will unlikely be able to distinguish between those who support Hezbollah and those who are not. And most people will be hurt by this, if not all. There'll be a major collateral damage. And I honestly think this is going to be bad for Lebanon, for the Lebanese people as a whole, and for the region as well. Because, in fact, impacting Lebanon's economy right now, or in fact at any time, but particularly at a very sensitive period in our region, this is really not good, frankly, policy for Lebanon or for the region. So we're really watching this very carefully. We really hope it doesn't escalate. We really hope it's actually dealt with in a very different way. And in fact, Lebanon here right now is sort of stuck between between two regional powers that have other objectives that they're actually trying to deal with.
But is there a way of Lebanon to get out of this by themselves? I mean, how can they take their action to grow their economy?
Well, you know, if Lebanon can take certain actions, of course, and in terms of improving its economic policies, I think we've been sort of at the center. We've been advocating for changes in industrial policy and job creation, improving infrastructure. But Lebanon does need capital. And it does have internal capital from the banking sector. And I think it actually could attract, and it does attract capital from abroad. So if left to its own devices, in the sense there are no economic sanctions on Lebanon, I think one can and see that that there will be changes in the government's policies to actually do that. And we're hoping that the new government that came into force almost or exactly a year ago to do that. And this is what we've been advocating and pushing them to do so. Now, with the crisis looming, this actually adds another layer of challenges that are very, very significant, and it may affect the macroeconomic situation because, as you know, Lebanon does depend for a significant capital inflow coming from all over the world, particularly Lebanese expats, and particularly those that are actually living in the GCC, including Saudi Arabia. So if that's actually affected, if the remittances are actually withdrawn or are no longer actually coming in, this is a very serious issue on the macroeconomic situation. It could escalate. I don't want to sort of predict, and I don't want to sort of scare sort of people about this, but Lebanon has been able to deal with that in the short term. In fact, the short-term effect has been quite minimal, given the gravity of the political situation. But if this ends up to be a protracted crisis, where in fact sanctions are imposed or Lebanese experts are actually forced to leave the country, and this ends up to be a 2 to 3 or 4 year problem, then this is a very serious issue for Lebanon's macroeconomic situation.
Good to speak with you. Sami Atallah joining us from Lebanon. Thank you.